people saying, "Oh, I designed a dashboard. I told a story." And I'm like, "No, no, you're not. You haven't told a story. You've just done a really good, clean dashboard, and that's where is that story? Where, what is that narrative? What is that storyline that goes through all of your dashboard?"
Welcome to the Data Nerd Podcast. I'm your host, Nisar Ahmed. Join me as we explore the inner data nerd inside all of us. Dive into the world of data alongside special guests who not only share their wealth of experience and knowledge, but also unveil what truly makes them data nerds. This podcast is brought to you by Business Intelligence. That's BIZNIS Intelligence. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel at Business Intelligence to stay up to date with Tableau training and the Data Nerd podcast. Connect with me on LinkedIn or stream the Data Nerd podcast across all major podcast platforms. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming Brent Dykes. Welcome, Brent Dykes, to the Data Nerd podcast.
Hey, glad to be here.
Glad to have you on. So for those of you who don't know Brent Dykes, I'll introduce him. Brent Dykes is a best-selling author of effective data storytelling, a data storyteller, and a LinkedIn top voice. He is the founder, chief data storyteller at Analytics Hero, with nearly 2 decades of experience in enterprise analytics consulting at Omniture, Adobe, and Domo. Brent has collaborated with industry leaders like Microsoft, IKEA, and Nike to help unlock the power of data. He specializes in delivering keynotes, workshops, and training courses that combine data, narrative, and visuals to create powerful stories that inspire action. As a Forbes contributor since 2015, Brent simplifies complex data concepts for broader audiences, and his training business has helped thousands enhance their data storytelling skills. Brent has also spoken at major conferences such as the Web Summit, Strata, and Rise, and appeared on numerous podcasts, webinars, and virtual panels to discuss data-driven topics. Does that about sum it up? Did I miss anything?
No, I think that's good. I think that's a good summary.
You had this article up related to data storytelling, and the article or the blog is titled
Mm-hmm.
"Why Dashboards and Dead Men Tell No Tales." And I
Mm-hmm.
thought like this really resonated with me. And when I read it, I you know I have to say I may not have seen it the way that you see it.
Mm-hmm.
But now I understand, and I think this is a topic that maybe some people may be unaware of that, and we'll get into the specifics of
Mm-hmm.
it. But that's kind of what I want to talk about here.
Yeah.
But before we do that, I do want to ask you an introductory question that I ask all my guests. This being the Data Nerd podcast, I'd like to ask if you're a data nerd. I think I know the
Okay.
answer to that. And if so, uh,
Would somebody who's a data nerd wear a hat like this?
well, you're no, that is true. And that's probably the answer. You don't even have to tell us, right? The picture speaks 1,000 words, right?
Yeah.
So, but tell us your story because dashboards
Yeah.
can tell stories on their own. You have to
Right.
tell the story. So you got to tell us your story. What made
Sure.
you a
Yeah.
data nerd? When did you realize you're a data nerd?
Yeah. So I was if I go back to business school, I was studying in business school, and I didn't know which major to go for. I was debating between marketing and accounting. And so that's kind of an interesting mix. Most people would say, "Oh, really? You're deciding between accounting and marketing?" That's kind of like opposites extremes in the business faculty. But it was because I was decent with numbers and I enjoyed doing the accounting classes. But my deep passion was on the marketing side and just the creativity and different things like that. And at the time when I was in school, analytics wasn't a thing. There wasn't really the only data exposure you could get into with, let's say, marketing outside of finance and accounting was market research. And somebody actually, a professor told a colleague of mine that was the way to make the least amount of money in marketing. So I wasn't really drawn to market research.
Yeah.
But so I went into marketing. I decided not to go into accounting, but I had that interest in the numbers and I was comfortable with the numbers. And then later in my career, after I went to MBA school, came out, signed on with a company called Omniture, that was kind of one of the first SaaS companies out there, and and they were doing marketing analytics. So I was able to combine both interests at that point, and that was really that's kind of from there I knew that I was in my sweet spot, being able to take the data on marketing campaigns or apps or whatever, websites or whatever, and then combine that with the number crunching, the analysis. I mean, it was
Yeah.
great. That's what I loved.
You know, a lot of people find their way into data or analytics not by getting a job directly as a data analyst or whatnot. They work in another role or they transition
Mhm.
into it. And it's very
Right.
common, right? Like sometimes you may have specialize in a certain industry and then you start working with the data and you're like, I really like this.
Yeah.
I teach a class in data analytics, and most of the students, it's a 10-week certification program.
Hmm.
Uh, Most of the students already are working professionals, but they want to
Hmm.
transition into analytics. So I think it's a very common theme for people to transition because data's out there regardless what job you're working as. You don't have to be an analyst to be a
No,
data.
no. And I would say people that actually come from a business background, they have an advantage over many of the more technical data people, because those data people, they struggle to understand the the meaning behind the numbers, and
Mm,
why we're doing certain things. Whereas if you come from the business background, you're like, oh, I know why this is important. I get, why we need to count, look at these numbers or different things. So for me, it's been an advantage coming from a business background, not coming from STEM. I'm not a stats guy. I'm not a
yeah.
engineer or any of those kinds of things. I'm coming from the business side, but it's been beneficial to me to kind of be able to combine both sides, my quant side with my qual side.
Yeah, I agree because I think people underestimate the business knowledge or acumen that you need because it's not all technical. It's
Right.
we're the middleman between the business and the data. And so you need to speak
Mhm.
both languages, the business
Yeah.
and data both. And having, like you said, having that business knowledge is definitely an upper hand when it comes to getting into analytics. So
Yeah.
completely agree with you there. But tell me about your journey into data storytelling, right? So we want to focus on storytelling here, and that's kind of the topic. What led you to focus on this space, storytelling?
Yeah. So I mean, a little bit of a story. So when I was at Omniture, I went into consulting, and so I was working with a lot of Fortune 500 companies, and I started over time started to really develop a lot of like expertise and best practices in marketing analytics, or digital analytics, as we called it. And I wanted to share those insights. And we had a corporate blog at the time. And I was like, hey, could I blog for the company? Well, this is before kind of companies figured out that like it was actually a good thing that people would do it. And so I was kind of actually told no, I couldn't. I couldn't blog for the company.
Yeah.
Only that was reserved only for executives. And I was like, oh, okay. So at that point, I was like, well, I still want to blog. This is like the mid 2000s or something like that. And I was like, I wanted to start writing. I wanted to start blogging.
Mm,
And I had purchased a domain, which I still own today, PowerPointNinja.com. And so I was like, I'm going to start blogging about PowerPoint Ninja, or about PowerPoint presenting,
mm,
communicating with data. And that was kind of like my initial kind of exposure. And as I started to do that, I realized that a lot of my fellow consultants, a lot of my clients really struggled with like communicating with data. And so that was where I was able to combine, those best practices in presenting and speaking and with my data background. Eventually, I was able to. Eventually, Omniture changed its mind and saw the SEO value of having expertise, experts like myself actually blog for the company.
yeah.
But I that's kind of that point where I started to get curious about communication, presenting, and then later on, Omniture was acquired by Adobe, and I was preparing for I'd spoken at a number of our customer conferences, and I came across this concept of data storytelling, and I was like, huh, I think this would be a really cool breakout. So this is like 2013, and I started thinking about, what could I present on? Started researching it, started getting more and more excited. And then I presented at the 2014 Adobe Summit, and it was one of the top sessions. It was super popular. People really resonated with people,
Mm.
and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And it was just kind of like, oh, this is perfect. Combines a couple of interests of mine. And then the next year, I presented again on the topic, again equally popular. And then I started speaking at other conferences, and then that's where it kind of snowballed from there. And then obviously Cole's book came out. That was kind of like the first kind of data storytelling related book. And then I realized at that point, as I would speak at conferences, people would say, are there any books out there that really talk about all facets of data storytelling? And that's where I felt, no. I mean, some talk about it lightly, but not really getting into all three pillars of data storytelling. And that's when I was inspired to kind of write my book and get it out there.
You talk about three pillars. What are the three pillars of data storytelling?
Yeah, for me, the three pillars are obviously data.
Mhm.
So consider data, if it's like a house we're building, data is the foundation, right? So obviously, if you don't have a good foundation in data, facts, information, you don't really have a data story. You just have a story. Then the next layer that we build on that, which is the narrative. So the narrative is a lot of the times I associate it with structure. It's how we structure, organize the flow of how we're going to talk about, our insights, our observations, and kind of tell that story. And then the third is obviously the visuals. And the visuals come in as like the scenes within that house that we're building. Now we're decorating it, not just decorative, but we're actually getting the furniture in there. We're laying
Yeah,
out the rugs, we're getting everything in there to make it livable and really make it come to life. And then, a third pillar I would add, or a fourth pillar I would add today is the delivery. And so really, how are we, think of that, we built this house, we built this data story. Now we're like, we're going to do a tour of that house to either our friends and family that, hey, come and see our new home, or maybe strangers, that are coming through to tour the house to buy it. Um, but those are the three pillars, and then that bonus fourth pillar would be the delivery.
I think that fourth pillar is very important because
Mm-hmm.
um, not. I think that's what separates good storytellers from, I don't know, non-storytellers is
Right.
their the soft skills, right? The
Yeah.
communication
Mm-hmm.
skills.
Yeah.
Um, because and so when you wrote so this let's talk about this blog post. Why
Yeah.
dashboard and dead men don't tell tales. You talk about the Pirates of the Caribbean, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think you're referring specifically to the ride at Disney.
Mm-hmm.
And in on that ride, I guess in the beginning of the ride, they
Mm-hmm.
echo something about dead men tell no tales, right?
Right.
And you kind of related that to dashboards and how dashboards are also don't tell tales on their own.
Right.
A lot of marketing or software companies or business intelligence tools kind of promote dashboards as the ability to tell stories, storytelling,
Right.
right? But what you're saying is building the dashboard on its own. So you're looking at the three pillars. Fine, you have the data, you have the
Mm-hmm.
visual, but that third
Mm-hmm.
component of the narrative has to be there in order
Yeah.
to be effective, right?
Right. Yeah, no, that's a big part of it, and that's what I feel like. If we look at dashboards, and again, I before people start freaking out and saying, "Oh, I don't value dashboards." I know there's some vendors out there that actually kind of put down dashboards and say, "Oh, dashboards are so, 2010, they're done." And I'm not in that camp. I believe in the power of dashboards. I feel like their role is very important in terms of monitoring the business and helping us to improve performance over time, really getting a sense for what's going on in the business. So I do see the role of dashboards, but in terms of telling a story, that's where I draw a line and I say, no, I don't feel like dashboards are actually the right tool to use to tell stories because, you know, for so many reasons, a dashboard is ill-equipped to tell stories.
So are you saying you need the human component? That it's a human who tells the story. It's you don't can't depend on the technology.
Yeah, I think a lot of the times when we think about a dashboard, like even just the mechanism of a dashboard, it's typically designed to be refreshing, right? So it's always refreshing. It's never standing still. The information's flowing through it, and it's like, oh, hey, there's a story. Oh, there it went. Oh,
Yeah.
oh, wait, hey, here's another one coming. Oh, wait, oh, it's gone. you know so it's constantly refreshing, it's constantly moving, and one of the things about a data story
Yes.
is it's really about snapshots. I take a snapshot of something. Hey, we saw this increase, we observed something, a metric spiked up or a metric went down, and then we investigate, right? What actually happened? What happened? What caused that? And that's another key thing about a dashboard. it Dashboards are very focused on the what happened, but rarely are you able to dig deeper and actually dig into the why. And that's a critical part of a story. In my book is that we're really digging into the why. And often, a lot of vendors use that term insight, and that's something I harp on a lot. Is we misuse that term insight a lot, especially in the analytics function or teams, business intelligence.
Mm.
We use it very loosely, and really, I like the definition that Gary Klein, author and psychologist, said that an insight is an unexpected shift in the way we understand things. And for me, that simple definition is gold, because really it defines. Because sometimes what people will say is, "Oh, our sales were up 200% last week." That's an insight, and I'm like, "That's not an insight. That's an observation. You've noticed something interesting." But that's just the what. You don't know why until you can really dig into the 200% why that why were sales up, you know, 200%. And is that unexpected? Maybe it's expected. Well, we ran this promotion. Okay, well, that's the answer. That, but maybe it's something, oh wow, we had this influencer who pointed, featured our product unexpectedly with no sponsorship or anything, but they talked about our product in a product video, and then that led to the 200% increase in sales. And that would be, oh wow, we had no idea that this influencer is talking about our product. That would be an insight that then maybe we reach out to that influencer and do something about it. So that's kind of the some thoughts on this.
So I mean the dashboard. So when I think about dashboards,
Yeah,
they're they could be an exploratory tool.
right.
Yeah. And it may lead you or point you in the direction that you need to head in to find the answer. But it may not give you the answer or the why, right?
Yeah,
The way that I'm hearing it from you is that the why will not come from the dashboard. The why is going to come in discussions with the business, perhaps, right?
it could, or it could come through analysis, deeper analysis, and sometimes maybe you could find an insight in a dashboard through the filtering and the drill downs. But I would say that's a rare case. Most of the time, it's like I see, and I know Steve Wexler and others kind of talk about data
Mm.
storytelling or dashboards in terms of finding stories or potential stories. And that's kind of where I see the role of dashboards as like the top of the funnel, where it's you can spot an anomaly, you can spot a trend or a pattern, but then you have to be able to dig deeper and maybe, to your point, get context. I might need to go talk to the marketing team or the sales team or operations team to understand, why are we seeing this, increasing trend here? Oh, that's because we just changed this, and we made this, and we did this. And now I'm starting to get further context. That could be a missing piece. Or maybe it's like, oh, I need to go look at another data set and drill into the information at a deeper level to really uncover the insight.
So it's really a starting point for
Yeah,
discovery, right?
yeah, yeah. I feel that's the role that the dashboard plays.
What if you design the dashboard in a way that, so you talked about you need to take a snapshot.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's suppose, um, let's say for argument's sake, we're looking at, I don't know, a sales dashboard. Okay. And you have sales over time. Okay. Over the course of the year. There are peaks and valleys or ups and downs throughout the year. Uh,
Hmm.
and with different products that you sell. Okay. Let's suppose I create this dashboard and I try to identify the outliers,
Hmm.
high and low. Okay. And then the dashboard will allow you to, when you click on a particular outlier, like suppose it's a weekly dashboard. 1 week, it was down 50%. So I want to know what happened. What if on that dashboard, I can click on that, that week and
Hmm.
get a breakdown of all of the products we sold and which products were sold less than average over over what's expected for that sale. Okay.
Yeah.
Will that not give me the answer on why I had lower sales for that week? If I design it in a way that will show you that?
Yeah, I think it could give you, depending on how you're designing your dashboard, it could give you an answer. Now, I draw a distinction between an answer and an insight, right? So an answer is something that is not unexpected. It's like, oh, okay, that explains it. I'm not shocked. I'm not, and answers are great. Probably most of the time we're providing answers in the analytics function.
Mm.
How many units of that product did we sell last week?
Yeah.
Which customers churned, in last quarter. Like we're providing a lot of information, a lot of answers. I draw a distinction on the insight, meaning that it's an unexpected shift in the way we understand things, and there's repercussions when we shift that understanding. That means we need to change what we're doing because it's like we were operating under. Let's take an example of we think our customers buy our product because of the excellent customer service that we provide. We are superior on the customer service. And while we do a study, we find out actually no, that's their third reason. There's two other reasons for why, and the top reason is because they find that it's compatible with this other system that they use. And we had no clue. We thought it was because of our customer service that they're buying our. No, it's because we're compatible with this other product they bought. Well, how does that change things? Well, we probably need to partner up with that customer or that product and see how we can make that integration even stronger and better. So that might change how we engineer our product and how we design, where we place our bets in terms of how we develop the product. It could also be marketing. Maybe we never featured in our marketing that we were compatible with that other product, and now it's like, hey, marketing. You know what? The reason why our customer survey is showing that customers really like that we're compatible with this other company. We should be featuring that in our marketing. So once we discover something that shifts our understanding, all of a sudden it can have all these cascading effects. And I kind of emphasize that you don't need to build a data story for an answer. Like if somebody's asking me, how many units of product did we sell last week? 300.
Yeah.
Do I need to build a data story for that? No, there's no data story needed. I can just, I can put that in an email. I don't need to tell a story. But in the other case where it's like, hey, we've always believed that our excellent customer service that brought our customers in and kept them loyal. It's actually this other integration that we have that we didn't even know that customers valued. Now we need to tell that story because that's going to have repercussion throughout the organization. That is a potentially big shift that we're going to have the organization make. And so building that as a data story is going to be really critical. So I kind of reserve storytelling and data storytelling for those key moments where you have an insight, or maybe it's just there's going to be a lot of resistance to an answer. Maybe it's an answer that we don't like, and we're just like, oh, we don't want to hear that. Well, that might be where hard truths is also an area where a data story can help.
So are you saying that we don't always need a story?
No, no, I think there's a lot of cases where we can just share information without a story. One of the paradigms that I look at it, in terms of a story, when does a story need it?
Yeah.
If it's like, say we did an analysis of your podcast
Yeah.
this year, and so we did an analysis, and it was like phenomenal, like all the metrics out of the park, everything is gold stars, 100% amazing. Do we need to tell a story? Do we really need to like tell a robust story in that case? Because you're just going to be like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Yes, of
Yeah.
course. Oh, yes. Do you have to change anything? No. Are you going to resist that story? No, you're going to be gushing at the end of that. Now, what if I came back and I did some analysis in let's say the 4 of the 5 areas that I looked at were all good, but that
Mhm.
fifth area was like, ooh, you know, there's something there where it's like a little harder, and maybe you don't want to hear that story. Maybe you don't want to hear that feedback. And so I find that a data story is going to be more needed in situations where there's a situation where maybe there's going to be resistance to the information, right? It's going to be harder to get you to change.
Yeah.
And so when change is hard, what do we rely on? We rely on communication. What is one of the best forms of communication? Storytelling. And so that's when storytelling comes. And then I would say it takes effort and work to build a story. And so another paradigm that I kind of look at is, what's the value of that insight? Is it a high value insight? Where maybe if I shared this feedback on your podcast and said, if you make this one change, I think you can triple your reach.
Mhm.
That could be incredibly valuable, but maybe the change that's required is hard for you to hear. And I would say that's in that sweet spot where it's high value to the audience, but also there may be some resistance. And so in that's what I call the story zone. You're in the story zone when those two things come together. You may be outside of the story zone if it's something that's straightforward or basic, low value, and maybe easy to hear. Then you're outside of the story zone.
So it sounds to me it may be a difficult thing to communicate. And there's probably an art or a best practices on how to communicate those stories, right? Because like you said, not everybody is open to hearing things that they're not expecting or criticism or whatnot.
Yeah.
Okay. And so uh, I hear data storytelling out there, like everyone's talking about data storytelling, but it's like so vague. And
Right.
some people think it's just the art of communicating. Like if you're a good presenter, that's
Yeah.
storytelling. If you can talk well, that's storytelling.
Right.
But the way that you define it is it's um, communicating something that is unexpected or a change or something that people do not want to hear, right? And so if you want to be a storyteller, how like are there certain things that you have to keep in mind or certain skill sets or certain things to be a good storyteller?
Yeah. I mean, that buy the book.
Okay, which
There's a
book is
lot,
that? Yeah,
this one. So effective data storytelling.
yes.
I talk about, and what I like to get into, being somebody who's curious and coming from an analytical background. When I wrote the book, I wanted, a lot of people would kind of share, oh, do this best practice, and that's going to work, and this is a good best practice. And part of me was just like, well, why does it work that way? Why do we respond to different things differently? And so part of my journey into data storytelling was to really understand the psychology behind why we prefer narrative over statistics. Why do we prefer a story over just raw data and facts? Why is a story so powerful? And then even getting into the visual side, why do we respond maybe to visual data better than we do just to raw
Hmm.
raw information, and all of those kind of repercussions, and just from a decision making perspective, I talk about Daniel Kahneman with his system one and system two, and just bringing in all of that. And so for me, that's an important part of it. And then obviously there's lots of techniques that we can borrow from the world of storytelling and business storytelling that we can bring into our data stories to make them more compelling, more engaging, more memorable.
Yeah.
Who doesn't want that?
One of the reasons I personally thought storytelling is effective is because people remember stories.
Yeah.
They may not remember facts, right? I can give a presentation and I say, okay, our sales are down 20% in this category month over month or year over year, blah, blah, blah. At the end, you may walk away and not remember it. But if I tell it like with a story,
Hmm.
then people can remember it or will remember it, uh,
Hmm.
and it will stick in their mind. Is that also one of the goals in storytelling?
Yeah, I would say the three benefits of storytelling are one is that it's going to be more memorable, it's going to be
Mm,
more persuasive and more engaging. And I'll give you a couple of examples. So from the memorability perspective, as I was writing my book, I read another book called Made to Stick by Chip and Dan Heath.
mm,
And in their book, they give a couple of examples of why stories are better than statistics. And the first one was the memorability. And Chip Heath, he's a professor at Stanford University. He teaches a communication class to undergrad students. And in that class, he does an exercise where he has the students, he gives them a bunch of data on a particular topic, and then ask them to incorporate some of these facts into short presentations that they're going to do when they take a kind of position on the topic. And so the students take the data or the facts. On average, they include about 2.5 statistics in their presentations. They form up into groups and present to each other, and they kind of rate each other and they get feedback and they think the exercise is over. Now, when they were presenting, 1 in 10 of those students would actually include an anecdote or a short story as part of their pitch or their presentation.
mm.
And after 10 minutes after that exercise is done, the professor comes back to them and says, after 10 minutes, says, how many of you remember any of the statistics that were shared? And only 5% of the students could remember any of the statistics, but 63% of them could remember the stories. And so if we think going back to Daniel Kahneman, who's this behavioral economist, our brains are not, they don't just process facts and data. They're trying to make sense of the world around us. And so when we place our facts or information in the form of a story, that's what our system one, as he calls it, which
Yeah.
is kind of represents our intuition and our, the heuristics and all of the pattern seeking and all that. It's trying to form a story. It's trying to remember the information as a story. So when you come where it's already prepackaged in a story format, that works really well for the human brain. It's almost like, oh my gosh, thank you. Our brain just says great, and then it doesn't have to do the work of actually forming that story. It's already done for it. And so that's a key thing. And then the persuasiveness in that same book, they share a study by Carnegie Mellon University where they had students take a technology survey, and after they did the survey, they paid them $5, and then they said, hey, would you like to donate any of this money to a charity? And it was a real charity called Save the Children. And and the students were given a brochure or a pamphlet on the charity, and there's two versions. One version had lots of data about the suffering of children in Africa due to illness and war and famine, and lots of statistics. And then they had another version that didn't have any data. It just talked about Rukia, a 7-year-old girl from Mali, and talked about the suffering that her family went through and how this donation would really help out their family. And so when they went back and looked at which version was more effective, they found that the story version outperformed the data version by more than double the average donations. And that's because connecting with a person, connecting with something, beyond just the facts and the numbers, is really important. And that's another part of the storytelling I talk about in my training. I talk about humanizing your stories. So not just saying, oh, here's a bunch of data on this, but let's put this in the context of, these are our employees, or these are our customers, or these are our prospects, or whatever, group, and then humanizing those numbers so that they actually resonate more deeply with the audience.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is a whole, I mean, we do a whole course on data storytelling, right? It's,
I am doing a course.
you are doing a course. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a masterclass course, and so it's we did an early access beta launch. We're just finishing up the last section, so it's available now, and you can get in. You have lifetime access, and it's yeah, and we
Online,
cover
online
yeah
course.
online. Yep, yeah, you can go to my website and effectivedatastorytelling.com, and then on the top nav you'll see a masterclass link that'll take you to the course page for that.
Oh yeah, I'll definitely check that out. Um, like you said, so um, I did a podcast on top skills that in data
Mhm.
analytics. Okay, and what the biggest shift I saw, and they classify data storytelling as a skill. It's
Yeah,
now moved into like the top 10 skills. When you're looking at job posts in analytics, data storytelling is there.
yeah,
I think people still don't really fully comprehend what that means. And
right,
to your point, I think people just think that, oh, I know how to build dashboards. I can make visually appealing um, dashboards, which means I'm a good storyteller.
right.
And um, that's not the case, right? It's a whole like like data visualization is effective. Yes, you're right. And I
Yeah.
think visually showing data is also an effective way of communication, right? But
Hmm.
it's on its own, it's not telling the story. And that storytelling, I think, is taking it one step further than the
Yeah.
actual visualization. It may be not even a, a replacement. It's not, you're not saying like, you don't need dashboards. Yes, that's your starting point. But then the next step is telling that story, right?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely critical. And I'm thinking of doing a blog post about this, but just I think a lot of people roll out dashboards and just expect, we build it and they will come, kind of field of
Yeah.
dreams kind of thing.
Yeah.
And in my experience working, in the industry in BI, I've noticed a lot of the time that doesn't happen. You put a lot of effort into building a beautiful dashboard or app or whatever it is, data product, and then it isn't used, and so I see one of the ways I think that data storytelling can help is you've put all this effort into building a beautiful data set, and a lot of really compelling information. As long as it's really aligned with what the audience cares about, that's great. But maybe another step that you need to take is to actually say, okay, we've got this dashboard. How can I tell a story? Can I use it as a launch pad for actually telling a story, or saying, hey, we've got this new dashboard. I'd like to tell you a story that I've generated from the data that was inspired by this dashboard. And then tell them, go into a deep dive on a customer segment, go into a deep dive into a particular area of the business or regional, and just tell that story. And then that'll start to get information like, oh wow, like I didn't know I could get that information from this dash. Yeah, like 80 or 90% of what I cover in this story is from this dashboard,
Yeah.
and that can then get people excited about using the tool and maybe discovering their own stories.
So let me ask you this. Can AI tell the story? You see AI, you see
Yeah.
co-pilots or agentic
Mhm.
agents or whatnot.
Yeah.
They've come a long way and it's still fairly new to a lot of people. But
Right.
I see I've used them and I've seen people use them to explain their data and tell that
Uh,
story. Do you think AI
yeah.
can do that for you?
What I see a lot of is not really explanation. I see description.
Mm,
And so a lot of the platforms that I see, they'll have some natural language generation, And I see a lot of vendors talk about this, like, oh, well, some people don't like to look at the visualizations or they don't understand the visualizations, so they need some text to explain what they're seeing in the visual. To me, that seems I always felt like no, it's you've got it in the reverse. If I have to read a book, but I can watch, I can watch a movie about it. Come on,
You know how
But
many times
anyways,
I've done that in high school? I didn't read the book. I just read,
right?
I watched the
Yeah.
movie. So, you know,
So I think a lot of those tools they kind of like, obviously it's sexy to talk about storytelling and so they'll position their product or features as telling a story, but really they're just describing the data, which again isn't not useful, but I would say it's probably more limited in value than they're selling it. Now, I just published a Forbes article this week
Mhm.
on what I call the human AI collaboration matrix. And what I feel, I take more of a humanist approach with AI, that I don't see AI automating everything. And I see a lot of vendors and a lot of experts out there say, oh yeah, data storytelling, that can be automated. Well, if we look at what we bring to the table that isn't in a that's difficult to replicate in a machine, what are some of those skills? It's things like creativity, it's things like empathy, it's things like social and emotional intelligence, it's
Yeah.
human judgment, it's contextual understanding, common sense, adaptive problem solving. These are all skills that are innately a part of us that the machines,
Yeah.
which, some people might say, well, eventually they'll be able to do that. Well, I don't know. I don't know. Will they be able to do it as well as us? And so I kind of positioned that the future of AI is not really AI replacing humans in the tasks that we do, but it's more humans with AI. Like how are we going to collaborate with these tools?
It's
And
a
so I
tool.
have a whole,
It's a tool
yeah,
you
go
can
ahead.
use to help you tell that story, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's how can it help me to be a better data storyteller? It's not going to automate the process. It's going to augment what I do. It's going to, I might have to evaluate what it's doing for me, and then I might be leading it, and those are the four quadrants that I talk about in the 2x2 matrix that I share in that article.
Yeah.
Um, but it's really about effectiveness, not just efficiency. And I think a lot of the focus on AI today has been efficiency and automation. And I'm like, no, there's so much more. How can we become more effective in our roles or as data storytellers through the help of AI?
Yeah. No, I agree with you. When I get asked that question for with dashboard development, they're like, "Will AI replace not will AI replace what we do?" I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't know. I mean, maybe there's some mundane manual tasks that could it help
Yeah,
with dashboard development, but um, it's I don't think it's going to create that full finished product for you. You still have to, it will do like 20% and you still have to finish the remaining 80%.
right.
What is it about dashboards that make them so effective? Each individual dashboard has its own custom, I don't know if it's the right word, story, but I say stories, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe
I talk it, yeah, I talk about it in terms of story framing. What
story
a
framing.
dashboard does, it
Yeah.
frames the story, the potential story that you can get out of the data. So it's that first step beyond just raw data, obviously, where it's like, oh my gosh, it's just a pile of data. Where with a dashboard, what you've done now is you've focused a lens on the KPIs, you focus a lens on the key dimensions, and now it's like, look here. Like you don't have to look at all of our data, the mountain piles of no, we've already done the hard work to kind of isolate the critical data that you need to look at it on a regular basis. And that's where you're going to see those stories emerge.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. No, you bring up great points. It's really shifted my mindset. Um, and I think data storytelling, like how long, like I don't know, is it a more recent phenomenon? Like has storytelling been around for a while, or is this something that people have focused on more recently?
I mean, I think vendors and different people have been talking about it, but there's a lot of misconceptions that I'm trying to overcome. One
Mhm.
is that data visualization and data storytelling are the synonyms. Whereas I'm like, I think there's a misconception out there that data storytelling is just data visualization, best practices, clean visualization, and I'm like, we've already kind of talked about it. No, there's so much more. There's the narrative component, there's the psychology. I mean, there's so much more than just clean visualization. The other area that I'm constantly battling, and I think this comes more from the vendor side, is just people saying, "Oh, I designed a dashboard. I told a story." And I'm like, "No, no, you're not. You haven't told a story. You've just done a really good, clean dashboard, and where is that story? Where, what is that narrative? What is that storyline that goes through all of your dashboard? No, there isn't one. You framed the data, you framed the story potentially,
Mm.
but there's no storytelling, emphasis on telling. Uh, and so, I'm trying to overcome these misconceptions. And I think when I originally started writing my book, I was worried that the term data storytelling would be one of those throwaway, gimmicky words, buzzwords that just, yeah, data storytelling, that was so, 2018,
Yeah.
and it kind of like everybody was talking about it, and then it just kind of like when people didn't see the real value of it, it just kind of went away and washed away. And I was like, no, like I saw that this was really powerful stuff, and I felt like that inspired me. That part of that concern was an inspiration for me writing my book to kind of explain there's a lot, there's power here. Like just storytelling in general is so powerful when you combine it with facts and data, or you wrap your facts and data in a story or narrative. It can go, your information can go so much further and go so many places that just raw data can't go.
Yeah.
And the effect that it can have on individuals, organizations, this is powerful stuff that we're talking about.
Yeah. No, it
So yeah,
completely makes sense. No, this has been great. I I think this is an area that me personally, I want to focus in on as well because, I have the experience with the visual, dashboard
yeah,
and visual design, business intelligence, data visualization. But I think that data storytelling aspect is, it's interesting. And it's something that I think a lot of people may want to do, but they maybe don't understand what it is. And I think, if they read your book
yeah,
or your course, we'll get a lot of insight there. So what I'll do is I will post a link to both
yeah.
where
Thank
they
you.
can purchase your book. And if you want to make your website available,
Yeah.
I'll post. Is it up already, the course? Or is it?
Yeah. Effective data storytelling, .com. You can go to the web. That's the book website. And then from there, you
Okay,
can link to the course. That's probably the easiest way.
perfect. And LinkedIn, they can follow you on LinkedIn as well.
Yeah. LinkedIn. Yeah. Definitely follow me there. I post a lot. I try to post a number of times each week. And so I provide different tips and different things. And then obviously the blog and write Forbes articles. And so with LinkedIn, it's a good aggregation. Then there's a newsletter too. If people are interested in this kind of content, you can sign up for a newsletter from the LinkedIn. You'll see at the bottom of every LinkedIn post, there's a link to the newsletter, or you can go to analyticshero.com and sign up there too as well. So a couple websites, but yeah, LinkedIn's a great, great, great place to connect with me.
Yeah, yeah. Perfect. No, a lot of great resources. Now, I want to end off with some rapid fire questions for you. Okay.
Okay.
So, dashboard or slide deck? If you had to pick one, which is your go-to?
Slide deck.
Why?
Because it's so much work to build a dashboard
It's faster, right? It gets
faster.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. What's your favorite chart type?
I'll just go with the standard bar.
Bar. Come on. I thought you'd be a little edgy and give me a
It's like such a good tool to use.
I agree.
But if we were to go with something a little bit more fancy, I kind of have in my heart, I have a little soft spot for Sankey diagrams. So
Oh, really?
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, okay. I like them, and I think they're great. I just think it's very hard, or you don't see it used in the business world very often, right?
And it might come from my background on the in the marketing analytics. So a lot of Sankey diagrams were very useful for like flows, so
Yes.
showing the flows between different marketing like websites and things. And so I had to work with them a lot and fallout reports and different things like that from the marketing analytics side. But
Yeah,
yeah, I kind of like the Sankeys.
fair enough. And last question. What's your biggest pet peeve when it comes to data presentations?
Pet peeve. I do not like when somebody says, okay, you have to do your presentation in 10 slides or less,
Yeah.
or 20 slides or less, and tell you how much time you have. And so one of my pet peeves is don't tell me how many slides I need to have. Tell me how much time I have. And
Yes.
and I'll worry about how many slides I require to deliver in that time. And that's kind of a pet peeve of mine.
You think people say that because they don't trust that you will properly estimate the amount of time it'll take you to go through the slides, and they say if it's 10 or less, chances are they're going to be, less than 10 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, and I think people do like a standard calculation of like, oh, 2 minutes a slide, 10
Right.
minutes. Okay,
Yep.
that's 20 minutes. That's it. You can't do more than 10 minutes or 10 slides. And it's like, well, I've had in my decks, I might have a slide that's 5 seconds or 10 seconds or 20 seconds. Now it is on me to make sure that I am ending on time. And that's a key thing that I need to, and I'll be honest, sometimes there's, if there's questions or maybe there's other things that happen during the presentation, then I can go over, but usually I'm pretty good. I'm within 2 or 3 minutes and often right on point.
Yeah.
Uh,
Listen, we were this podcast is usually half an hour. We went over, but that's okay because this was a great conversation, and I think there was a lot of points that I wanted to continue with, right? And so, yeah, you got to be flexible, right? You read the
yeah,
room, see, adjust accordingly.
yeah.
And I'm assuming in data storytelling, you should probably do a similar type of thing, right? Like, does that happen where you have a story that you want to tell, and then when you're telling that story, you may have to adjust the story based on how they react to it or the questions that come from it?
Yeah, I mean it's an interactive thing when you're telling a data story. It's not just a one-way delivery and deliver it and then spike the ball and then you're out of the room. No, it's
Yeah.
you want interaction, you want questions, you want people to kind of and again you might say, you know what, this story isn't going as I planned, and we need to stop the story and talk about some of the issues that that story has brought up, and that's valuable too. So I wouldn't see that as a failure. I'd see that as no. What it's done is it's highlighted an issue that maybe you weren't aware of, and now you're bringing it out into the open. So that's not a failure of your data story. It's actually, I would say that's a win because you've now uncovered something that you didn't know, and people are feeling free to share their ideas or their opinions. And hey, communication, it's
I,
critical.
I like that outlook. I can tell you're a very optimistic person. A pessimist would see it a different way. So great. No, thank you for coming on. This has been great, great insights, and appreciate your contribution.
Thank you for having me.